If you haven't, please watch part 1 of this video essay, link included in the description. You know you're really getting old when you look back on your childhood. Chock full of inferior technology, all the adults did was lecture you because the truth was, they never knew what the hell they were doing either. And worst of all, you had no money. Your only option was to beg dad for it and hope he wasn't feeling cheap that week. But then there were video games. They never disappointed the way real life did. I think one of my personal favorites had to be Diablo 2. This is still an FF14 video, by the way. I'm building up to it, trust me. Oh, the way I wasted my youth slaughtering demons from the deepest pits of hell. Between that and StarCraft, my kill count's gotta be in the 8-figure range by now. Bare minimum. So this last year was quite a treat when the newest installment, Diablo 4, dropped. More than a quarter century after the first game. I was amazed the franchise was still ongoing. And concerned. Very concerned. So get this. In the third game, our character is the Nephilim, a hybrid of angel and demon, and Lord, you best believe we curb-stomped everything in our path. Between us being stronger than either of the other races, and the absurd gear requirements a game let you farm for, 800 hours later of course, nothing could stand in our way. In the end, even the namesake of the franchise himself met his end, and this was after he accumulated the souls of all the other lords of hell, essentially becoming the embodiment of evil. Crazy. We took it a step further in the expansion Reaper of Souls. Not only are we forced to fight the some power of the demon lords once again, but also the avatar of death itself. And again we prevailed. Woo! Humanity rules, good for us. So this begged the question, where do we go from here? What new obstacles could we encounter to provide an adequate challenge? These were the sorts of conundrums I had when the fourth game was announced. There didn't seem to be any alternate threats, based on the lore at least. This made for one of two possibilities. Either they would introduce a new faction, not yet divulged into the narrative, and build off of that, creating a whole new avenue of lore and entertainment for us to pursue, or they would reset the board to a previous state, weakening our potential to make the pre-existing threats something to fear once again. I had hoped for the former option to be true. It was not. As of Diablo 4, the Nephilim are gone. I played through the entire main game and I don't recall the word Nephilim being brought up even once. Humans, descendants of the original Nephilim, are all weak, scattered, despondent. The world is fragile, demons and monsters lurk everywhere. Our player character is strong, sure, but nothing like the previous installment. Hell, we don't even fight a prime evil in this game, the big bads of the series. It was a huge letdown seeing so much potential circle the drain like this. And FYI, this was around the game's launch. I don't know what patch updates they may have added since then, or if any of the side quests address this issue, and honestly, I don't much care at this point. Still, feel free to enlighten me, ye who've delved more into the lore. Nerdy stuff is always appreciated here. All those years of development, and they handicapped us when it got to be too difficult to manage, dragging us back just to make the status quo relevant again, but not for new experiences, just new product. Thus, we return to the insurmountable issues with Endwalker. See, told you we'd get back to it. In the first video, we had discussed how defeating Zodiark was a ludicrous outcome. Both given arguments and even some hypotheticals all fell apart immediately, and only exposed how mishandled the storyline was. Today, I want to talk about how the game dropped the ball validating this feat further on in the game, as well as shortchanging our strength and abilities. And believe me folks, we needn't look far to see how hilariously bad it gets. The story immediately following the end of 6.0, our foray into the 13th world, better known as the Void. Now, for the first few story patches, I was mostly enjoying myself. Seeing a world corrupted by the overabundance of dark ether formed a neat parallel to the first, a world overrun by light. A world we grew intimately familiar with back in Shadowbringers. Learning how the spread of dark occurred and how this twisted world operated on those rules, these were interesting developments as they expanded our knowledge and presented new possibilities that could be exploited later. I'll admit it, I'm a dork for details like this. Hard magic systems, rules of behavior, cause and effect, etc. Not only did it give us insight into how things may work in an otherwise alien world, but it creates limitations and rules that writers must follow and find creative workarounds for. It shows effort and dedication to the story and its elements, which is far more rewarding for everyone, I would argue. As an added bonus, we got to work more closely with Vitra, one of the first brood of dragons. His story revolves around fighting his sister Ashdaya, who had gone missing in the Void ages ago, and now he's finally the chance to find her and bring her home. Her role plays heavily into events as we near the climax. Then there's the inclusion of a new ally, Zero, through whom we learn more about the Void. And she's okay. I mean, her drip is phenomenal, let's be honest. Reaper's kick-ass. Her detached behavior fits into a world that personifies entropy, kind of neat. Her non-stop ranting about friendship got a little carried away towards the end there.
My friends. I need friends to walk beside me. And you are the friend, are you not?
It's fine, I get the idea, but when it's all your character talks about, you only draw awareness to just how little development your character actually has. I'm just saying, you can have more than one motivation. It's healthy, I promise. Okay, let me be real. She's a goth waifu.
Shall we disrobe as well?
My generation was reared on goth waifus. Let us have this. Y'shtola is wonderful, but she can only keep one cathartic for so long.
You and I will speak later.
Ruh-roh. Everything was widely going well until patch 6.4 dropped, dubbed the Dark Throne. The current antagonist Golbez and his legion of Voidsent revealed their plans to create a rift between their world and ours, allowing a swarm of monsters to pour through. Millions stand to die if we don't stop them. A new calamity is on the brink, as so soon after the final days ended too. We confront Golbez on the moon of his world, and after an entertaining trial we kick his ass, to no surprise honestly, only for him to pull a 180 and enact his diabolical plan. Having captured Azhdaya, he corrupts her with an overabundance of dark ether, just like all the Voidsent we fought. It drives her mad, devolving into an instinctive beast he calls Zeromus. Worse yet, the ether Golbez uses is the remnants of one of Zodiark's 1/14th shards. This gets stand into how powerful a monstrosity Azhdaya has unwillingly become. A beast Golbez will use to finally shatter the divide between worlds, so that the massacre can begin. So we have our enemy, we have our stakes, the lines drawn and set. All the necessary twists and turns for a narrative to run on. What, pray tell, is the problem then? Well, we run away. We run and regroup to think up a new strategy to combat this threat. Now, an inquisitive mind might be compelled to ask, why? In the name of Zeus's shaped nethers, why are we running away from a Voidsent born from a mere 1/14th fragment of Zodiark strength, when we had already beaten the bulk of his entire being? A full 8/14ths. Objectively, we have defeated something 8 times more powerful than anything the Zeromus can muster. What is the dilemma here? But wait, it gets worse. Because those who die on the 13th do not remain dead. The world has no life stream, nowhere for the soul to go, so they return, forever stagnating in the world devoid of the energy of life. Besides being a neat piece of lore, this also makes clear that we need to defeat this monster here on the 13th to ensure that we can save Azhdaya. On our own world, her soul would move on and be lost to us. We are in the right place to have this fight. Perhaps we were winded from slap-aging Golbez around, but it sure doesn't look like we broke a sweat. It was a fun trial, do not get me wrong, but our supposedly invincible character does not look worse for wear here. So I ask again, why the holy backwards Fumbled are we running away? Like with Zodiark, the game magics up some excuses to help rationalize this. And it does a terrible job, just like Zodiark. Take this moment with Y'shtola right here.
Our warding scales may not hold. Not against a Voidsent born of Zodiark's ether.
Alright, we're running away because our defenses aren't suitable. Reasonable cause for alarm. One small problem we need to raise. Does our character even need a warding scale? We've shown ourselves to be a match for something several times more powerful than this Zeromus. How does power scaling work in this world where you can easily kick something's high but still be corrupted by its power on such a fundamental level? If the bulk of Zodiark was manageable, and Zodiark was also manufactured from darkness, then Zeromus would neither be a threat nor capable of corrupting us. Theoretically, at least. More importantly, we should still have Heidelin's protection ward, her so-called blessing of light. The one she mentioned back in Elpis meant to protect us from corruption. The warrior shouldn't be hindered by the skills not working, which makes this argument nothing more than a contrivance meant to justify the developers dragging out the situation. But like so many issues with this expansion, there's too little substance to buy into it. We shouldn't need the scales, we're stronger than its enemy. Why not end the threat now before there's more collateral damage? We have everything needed to finish this fight here and now. Even should the others need to retreat because of the scales weakening, Zero, a Voidsent, and us are enough to weaken Zeromus until we can free Azhdaya and be home in time for dinner. By all accounts, this matter should be as easily said as done. But nah, the game needs to pad out the runtime, so we're just going to ignore the inconsistencies and pretend all is well. Another bit of nuance the game tries to include is this veil of darkness you see is in fact a barrier, a powerful shield barring us from assaulting Zeromus until it has fully awakened. Not sure why it needs time to awaken, all that ether it was drowned in should have done the trick awfully quick. It's almost as though the story is manufacturing a convenient timetable for us to counteract the threat, before it can streamline a genocide. How fortunate for us. Also, it's completely unnecessary. This barrier argument is flimsy, at best. We've seen in the past that those of superior strength and power can break through barriers of weaker opponents. Consider this moment from Stormblood when Sqaure tried to block a strike from Zenos. It doesn't end well for her despite her considerable talents. All Zenos needed was two hands Kenpachi Zaraki style and her defense is shattered. And consider how easily we threw hands with Zodiark of all things. The strength we already have at our disposal ought to be more than enough to tear through this barrier and put down this threat. And if anyone wants to argue the Asm Crystal is what helps us cover the power gaps, that only ruins its inclusion by having us only use said crystal during trials and raids. Running away from a threat rather than using your strongest tool to end it now is silly. It is stupid. I'm sorry folks, there is no metric, no excuse, no caveat to validate the situation we're in. I will give Endwalker a break and point out that barriers and their effectiveness are kind of a mixed bag. Look back to Heavensward when we infiltrate As's Law. We had to jump through a multitude of hoops to develop a means of bypassing the shield guarding that facility. So this barrier contrivance is nothing new, but it is a contrivance, an unreliable one at that. Just like grasping for easy explanations for us besting Zodiark, clinging to excuses the story throws at us is an easy habit to get into. Focus on the data they draw attention to whilst ignoring all the available information to the contrary. It forces us to cherry-pick whatever is convenient for the moment. Essentially, you should simply switch off your brain and accept whatever you're being told to accept. Which is a confusing lesson on Square's part, considering our main cast of characters almost entirely hail from a nation of literal book nerds. Analysis and adaptation to new information is a Scion's specialty, yet the explanations given are easily dismantled with minimum effort. A habit that's becoming more obvious the longer we delve into the outcome of our Zodiark fight. Look, I hate wrecking this. Really, I do. Reflecting on what I just said about the Scions, we see some really good stuff in this patch. The story had a great deal of potential, ruined by some key elements that entirely derailed the experience. The idea of using excess light from the first, for example, and channeling that into the void is on paper an ingenious solution. Hell, we even discover a means of transversing other worlds, which could be used to unlock all matters of new lands and peoples in the future. There is much Square can do with the knowledge we've unlocked since 6.0 ended. I do sincerely hope that they utilize it in the not-so-distant future. I'm sure I'm going to piss off no shortage of people with that claim, but it needs to be reiterated. Our victory over Zodiark spoiled so much potential. Our conflict against Golbez only solidifies this point. Imagine how much better events would play out had we lost to Zodiark instead. Now it can be argued that even a mere fragment of his power is too much to prevail against, without some tricks of our own. Then, the nuances have a place to fit in. Now our characters and their endeavors will carry so much more weight in turn. We're no longer killing time. The threat in this scenario is genuine. The threat we got, not so much. Now we can grasp at straws and argue that the real threat wasn't Zeromus itself, but its purpose, to create a beachhead so that a swarm of Voidsent can invade. This certainly adds a twist to the equation, just not enough to make a difference. We could have beaten down Zeromus multiple times without breaking a sweat. Its power could have been contained, preoccupied with getting constantly backhanded by yours truly. There would be no opportunity for the invasion to begin. Add in Zero, who can use Memoria to seal Zeromus and Crystal, and we have ourselves perhaps the most straightforward fight in FF14 history. Any nuance we try to squeeze into the situation is easily thrown aside by our character's absurd power. But you know the real kicker? What is probably the worst thing about the Zeromus fight? The game gave us the perfect solution to this whole predicament right in front of our eyes. Because after our initial victory, the Voidsent re-emerges. There's no lifestream, remember, so Zeromus is functionally immortal, no matter how many times we strike it down. Okay, that's in line with the mechanics of this world. That works. Then before Zeromus can attack us again, what happens? Estinian, Y'shtola, Zero, Vitra, all of them swoop down to help us corral Zeromus and push it into submission. Shoot, Golbez switches sides and joins in on the fight. Together we weaken the monster enough to free Ashdaya of her corruption, and the darkness is dispelled. Our world is safe. Nicely done. Where the specter hell was this when we fought Zodiark? Just imagine please. If the Scions had all turned up following the trial and helped us beat him down instead of us doing it single-handedly. Maybe deploy some unique tools they have at their disposal. The Watcher could aid us in this regard, so he's more than just a mere exposition dump. After all, his job was to monitor Zodiark's imprisonment. Let us use that to our advantage. This moment right here with Zeromus should have happened with Zodiark. And everything I've been talking about, all the conundrums, the short-sightedness, and the power scaling issues, would be non-existent. Between everything done in the 6.5 story patch, Square has officially put more work into besting Zeromus, an entity born again from a mere 1/14th fragment of Zodiark, Then they did us defeating the core of his being, the majority of his power. I was at a genuine loss for words at how ass-backwards these events were. I could not reason with it, because it was unreasonable, nonsensical, comically tone-deaf to its own established rules and limitations and the potential outcomes from those factors. Herein lies the inevitable dilemma of giving us such monumental feats. It results in us gauging our future endeavors through the lens of our greatest achievements. And when we fail to meet these standards without clear explanations, which as discussed in the previous video the story does not accomplish, any defeat thereafter becomes implausible. This Zeromus matter was a non-threat. Its implied difficulty, completely artificial. Basic critical thinking can tear this entire storyboard apart. I cannot imagine what the thought process was during the writing. Did they expect us not to think about it? There was damn near 2 years between 6.0 and patch 6.5. A lot of time to pass and forget about things and move on. I suppose if we were to be generous, we are turning to a new chapter in our character's journey and aim to leave past events behind to focus entirely on the road ahead. But that's a foolish notion. Starting a new chapter doesn't invalidate the rest of the story. Continuity doesn't apply just when it's convenient. For comparison, imagine spending months upgrading your gear, farming until you've got top-notch stats maxed out with the best materia for your class, just so you can run ahead into the next dungeon and realize your DPS is lower than ever before, just so the developers can artificially make the game more difficult. We all know what would happen. Players would riot. We would yoink the frenzied flame out of Elden Ring and set Eorzea ablaze. It's basic pattern recognition, all of this. Everything we've been discussing for 2 videos now. That's all we need to recognize that nothing happening in Endwalker's storyline is congruent, save for not putting any thought into the narrative. There is no true development in either our feats or the danger posed by our opponents. This is not how you tell a story. This is not how we inspire progress and development and the excitement one generates from that progression. It's a damn hamster running itself to death on a wheel. You're in the same place no matter how fast and hard you run. It's easy to dismiss this as an oversight or an accident. The writer's just having some fun with the script and packing it with all kinds of member berries for all the Final Fantasy IV players in the community. I'm certain many of them had a blast with these story patches. Maybe I could let it go too, if this had been the only blunder in the expansion. It wasn't. Following our return to the planet after Zodiark's defeat, we begin seeking out signs of the coming apocalypse. The island nation of Thafnir, where we had already spent some time earlier in the game, is where the catastrophes first manifest. The sky is lit aflame and the people begin to panic. Soon that panic evolves to madness as the citizenry breaks down and begin to mutate into hideous monsters. Devoid of reason and self, they blindly attack their friends and families, who all try to flee in terror. And thus the infection spreads like wildfire. Even the capital of Ranzatan cannot halt the spread. The Scions join the city guard in fighting back, but there's just too many, and anybody is liable to transform into a beast next, meaning the threat is essentially everywhere. Everyone. And I will say that I loved almost everything about this scene. It perfectly captures what the end of the world ought to instill. It is chaotic. It is horrifying. This random man here had to watch his own child morph into a monstrous beast, just to get instantly stomped out before his very eyes by an even bigger monstrosity bearing down on him. There is no word, no metric to gauge how traumatic this situation is. Something no doubt other people across the city are experiencing themselves. We've got horror, desperation, melancholia, and tragedy, all weaved together, pushing people to the edge of despair. It made me wish FF14 had a larger budget to see more moments precisely like this all across the city. I 1000% appreciate how unrestrained they were. And then they pretty much ruined it with our character's selective handicap. You see, the nation's ruler, the Satrap, joins us in defending his people when the outbreak occurs. Whilst trying to protect this poor man, he's rooted and about to be consumed by this enormous aberration. Quite terrifying. And where might we be, you wonder? The warrior of light, the hero who defeated the bulk of Zodiark's might, who could never possibly falter in his duty, given all that we have seen. We're right there, maybe 10 feet away, chasing after him like a morbidly obese sloth overdosed on melatonin. Taking our sweet time, aren't we? Ooh, tough luck, pal. You know, it's really too bad gap closers aren't a thing in this game. This tragedy might have been avoided. Ah, shucks. Before anybody starts defending this scene, before anyone argues that it serves a different purpose and our character's strength wasn't the main focus, let's rewind a wee bit and see if we can't spot any discrepancies, perhaps, with our little goof here, shall we? Specifically, our time in Garlemald. Try and recall when we were forcibly body-swapped with a random Garlean soldier, while Zenos himself possesses ours. A little ruse to mind-screw us and buy more time for the villain's machinations. A mechanic with colossal implications that will never be utilized again. Take that how you will. I got some mixed thoughts about the instance that followed. On one hand, it was something different. Unique even. Stealth hasn't been a significant mechanic in the series outside of maybe the ninja questline. Front flip. On the other hand, it was extremely frustrating navigating the war-torn streets, sneaking around rather than fighting through every obstacle. If I remember right, the server was chock full of players voicing their complaints about these very issues. Do we remember how, despite being trapped in a significantly weaker body and being forced to tiptoe around multiple enemy positions, trying to find a way back to our home base, we were still able to successfully escape and to cut off Zenos before he could hurt anybody using our own body? That was some dramatic timing, may I say. Quite fortunate. I mean, here we are at the Alliance Operating Center. And there's the city. Bit of a stroll, isn't it? So, pray tell, what happened to that miraculous endurance of ours in Thavnair? We're in our own body, we've bested Zodiark by this point, and to top it off, we're within spitting distance of the Satrap. In what utter defiance of rhyme or reason would this situation be believable? If anything, these outcomes should have been swapped. It makes far more sense for the Satrap to be saved, but we failed in preventing Zenos from attacking our friends. It's a bit of a missed opportunity, to be frank. One of several in this game. There would be some fantastic stakes generated from one or two of the signs being out of commission for a while. But of course, they're main characters, and main characters have plot armor. This poor sod did not. Who cares if that resulted in our unconquerable hero mucking up so badly to be worthy of their own Three Stooges skit? This is precisely the point I've been getting at about the significance of consistency. Contradictory moments will always stick out like a sore thumb undergoing the early stages of necrosis. Not everything needs to be logical to the point of zero creativity. Obviously, sometimes things can happen for the hell of things happening. It's still fantasy for God's sakes. That's what we love it for. Although for a fantasy world I still pay taxes and fees. Something's not right there, must investigate further. I can't be the only one who finds it strange how casually Endwalker doubled back on our feats of strength and weakness, depending on what's convenient in the moment. We're only strong because the scene demands it. Now we're weak, for the same reasons. Nothing more, no reason besides the ones of the writers, rather than a coherent development we can look at and understand, all of which makes this death scene look not only absurd, but hilarious as a consequence. It's only made worse by the realization that this happened all for the sake of facilitating a dramatic moment. And do not misunderstand, people, it was a dramatic moment. As we learned earlier in the game, Thavnair is not truly ruled by the Satrap, but by Vitra. It was through the Satrap's lineage that Vitra had operated clandestinely for centuries, caring for and protecting the people from the shadows. These two were lifelong friends. Of course, Vitra was devastated to hear that his friend had been killed. And given the calamities impacting the country, he's forced to step forward and reveal himself.
Vitra! Our people, you must save them.
Just like the Satrap desired. And despite his reservations, Vitra's people gladly accept him. There is some fantastic character development stemming from his death. It's apparent that's what the writers were aiming for. I don't mean to trivialize that. Had they arranged this moment differently, it wouldn't have been such a blunder. Have the Satrap taken a squad into a separate area of the town to render aid while the Scions and we tend to the immediate threat? That could have worked if he's away when ambushed and overwhelmed. We still get the scene needed to progress the story without making us look like fools in the process. It was a very easy fix, all things considered. So how in the fatuous, brainless Buddha are we supposed to take this failure seriously? Did we skip leg day or something? Perhaps we pulled a hamstring. Does the Warrior of Light need to stretch more often before world-ending threats calls him to action? I don't know because there is zero context to this situation. It happened, then we moved on. Same problem with Zodiark, and again, I can step back and understand what the writers were thinking. Besting Zodiark on the surface was a real milestone for us after 5 games of story and experience. No doubt many people felt great, powerful even. The Satrap's death spurred critical character development that enriched the narrative. Also good. The problem is, these are explanations motivated by the desire of the storyteller, not in-universe explanations that reasonably accommodate the events unfolding. They let the writer achieve a certain emotion, a certain kind of high. But in the world of the game the universe we're meant to be submersed within, all you would see is the cause, not the reason behind it. Think of it like glitches in the Matrix. Anomalies that lack logical explanation. They expose the flaws in the world's crafting, failing to make it feel alive or tangible, real. In fact, you get the opposite result once you recognize the fallacies in play. Our victory over Zodiark was a dopamine rush, an ego boost, not a milestone. Our comedic failure with the Satrap was to inspire character growth, and not even for our own character. We are weak and strong based on convenience. So any gains or emotions we experience through them are every bit as arbitrary. Does that sound like the ideal way to tell a story to you? Honestly, I don't see how we could realistically struggle against most opponents in this game ever again. Not without looking back on these moments and wonder where the disparity came from. And there lies my biggest concern. I touched on this in the previous video, and some commenters reflected much the same. Please consider what the hell we're supposed to do in future expansions. With the events surrounding Ancient Amaranth, the Ascients, and Zodiark concluded, where do we go from here? What are the chances of us ever finding another enemy on par with Zodiark to fight? To keep raising the stakes, to be invested in the trials and struggles to come, we need threats that are real, that can hurt us. And seeing as to how an entity like Zodiark was not that big of a deal, apparently, there are conceivably few, if any, threats left on the planet that could prove a challenge. And trying to create any and squeeze it into the main story will only succeed in downplaying everything that made the Ascients in the ancient world such intriguing concepts to interact with and explore. Their level of strength, their wisdom, and desires, they will be made subpar, futile. To simply throw in a new Zodiark level threat on the Theris, just conveniently waiting on the sidelines until we were at an appropriate scale to be worth the effort? Nobody's gonna find that believable, not a chance. Look, sometimes losing a fight holds greater potential for your character than victory does. There's an important lesson in that. Losing to Zodiark would leave a wide threshold of potential threats that could fill the gap between ourselves and the vast power of the Ascients, of Zodiark, a potential that is now lost to us. And like I said before, everything we face will be devalued as a consequence. It's the only way forward with the current status quo. That sure as hell is not a suitable send-off for Emmett Selk and Hyflodeus and everybody we knew and interacted with. Not even close. The only way to make future confrontations intriguing is to artificially weaken the Warrior of Light all over again to make these new empirically lesser threats something to take seriously. Just as it was with Diablo 4 and the disappearance of the Nephilim. Just as we saw with our fight against Zeromus. All our efforts and accomplishments are going to be erased, reset. The first instance, they become problematic, erasing potentially years of progress, making one wonder why we ever bothered in the first place. Look, I know I'm being dramatic about this, and to be fair, there have been a lot of inconsistencies with our character strength over the years. Remember back in Realm Reborn when a bunch of NPC noobs arrested us in Thanalin? That was nonsense. We let them take us, I know it. We were being polite. So I do want to be fair to Endwalker. Final Fantasy XIV has had this problem before. And so we return to Stormblood. Early in the game, we're drawn into a fight that has a rather unexpected outcome. When the Empire assaults Rhalgr's Reach, hideout for the local resistance movement, we square off with Zenos, the Crown Prince of the Empire himself. I remember just how tedious it was draining that man's health pool. I run Samurai as my main, my gear was all up to date, and my DPS at that point was nothing to scoff at. Rest in peace, Kaiten, you are gone but not forgotten. Still, I and every other player out there get our asses beat. So bad, in fact, Zenos was disappointed in us.
Pathetic.
Yeah, we went from beating Ascients and artificial gods to being labeled a disappointment in a single fight. That's not even insulting. It's just impressive how fast the game kicked us off our ego train. And I was here for it. I was excited. Finally, an adversary for us to measure up against. A true opponent. One we will need to redouble our training to steel ourselves against. I have been waiting for a plotline like this. The character development stemming from our rivalry will be epic. And then, nothing came of it. What I mean is, at no major point throughout the game did our character sit down and take stock of what just happened. Nobody asked us how we, their so-called champion, could have lost. Any sign of people losing faith in us or the cause is short-lived, at most. It happened, then we moved on. It was an empty loss, just like Zodiark is a shallow victory. We don't train, we don't peer deep into ourselves to see what it was that held us back. Nothing suggests we went into that fight overconfident in our abilities. All we got following that fight was some optional dialogue relaying how wounded our egos are. Not exactly a three-dimensional purview of our situation. I get that as our personal avatar. The warrior doesn't get much characterization. Every player is unique in their own way, so anything concrete undermines that immersion. That's fine. Here though, by getting kicked down so brutally, there's an expectation that we must build ourselves back up, regain our equilibrium so that the next time we fight Zenos, we will be better prepared. something that never happens in Stormblood. Giving us a goal to reach but lacking anything of substance to complement that development, it largely defeats the point of that progress to begin with. Look, think of it like a romance without a hint of chemistry between the two lovers. You see them going through the motions, but it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like anything. And I just realized my romance comparison is a little too on the nose given Zenos' murder crush on us.
Such ferocity, such tenacity.
I ship it. Later in Doma, we face Zenos again, and again we're beaten back. Although this time we do show some progress, managing to damage Zenos' armor, and we even get a compliment out of it. How warm and fuzzy we must have felt. Except the question remains why? Why do we keep up here and not back at Rhalgr's Reach? What changed about us between there and now to validate why we're a more suitable rival for Zenos? There's no explanation for it outside of story development. Did working alongside the Resistance give us a new sense of purpose? Possibly, but we've seen innumerous people during our adventures with similar desperation. It's nothing new, and using that for motivation feels like backtracking for our character. Was it ego then? Were we cocky? The warrior has an impressive resume, let's be honest. But no, nothing discussed to work with there. Everything explaining our rivalry with Zenos is conjecture, which creates a colossal problem at the game's climax, where we have our final bout with Zenos, and this time, we beat him, at long last, pushing him back with no doubt catharsis for many a player. Woo! Alamigo is liberated, let's break out the booze and bungee jump off these massive pillars that exist for reasons? I don't know. But then, we're thrown a twist, shocker, when Zenos retreats and reveals to have shackled a powerful primal. A primal he then proceeds to fusion dance with, to facilitate the final boss fight. Holy shiitake, we skipped some levels. And spoiler alert, we win again. And again, I ask, why? What changed between that first fight and this last fight? There's no training arc, no special ability boost. We didn't go Super Saiyan, didn't access the Speed Force, hack into the Morphing Grid, or unlock a Bankai. We just weren't strong enough. And then we were. A struggle for our character to endure, confined to a neat and tidy 3-part act. But there was no substance, no development where it was needed. It was an artificial struggle. The accomplishment didn't make sense. The fights were fun, but it was a meaningless victory. One can argue that because we run these dungeons and trials allied with other adventurers, we have backup to help us prevail. But that's a bit of a weak explanation. The Duty Finder is mostly gameplay mechanics at work. It's not worth much as an explanation with Zenos. Besides, I doubt he would ever consider us his murder bestie if we had beaten him with help. So, maybe through leveling and upgrading our gear? I suppose, though based on that first fight, it would have taken a few expansions of leveling to make up that psychotic leap of difference. Besides, once again, gear grinding is just another element of gaming. It's never really been used to explain canonized events before. For us to lose to Zenos at what is essentially his base level, just to beat him to a pulp after fusing to a primal on par with Bahamut, another primal that caused an entire hot damn calamity, it's ludicrous, it's silly. It's so imbalanced, the inevitable whiplash that followed disoriented me to the point I zoned out during the final cutscene. I hardly registered the moment where Zenos sliced his own throat in defeat because I was too preoccupied trying to calculate all the BS I just experienced. To no avail, I might add. The Zodiark fight wasn't any different. A massive buildup that was exciting to experience, but upon reflection was a mind-numbing experience whose real purpose was appealing to spectacle, not reason. In fact, I would argue it's worse than with Zenos when you consider the scale and weight behind Zodiark's defeat. It was all of it poorly explained. It was unearned. With Dawntrail's release on the horizon, these are the kinds of problems that have been concerning me more and more. I want to be more excited about it, and I'm holding out hope that they deliver us a memorable product. I wasn't impressed with Stormblood, if my rant didn't make that apparent, nor was I super excited for Shadowbringers at first. And then, well, let's just say that one ranks as a GOAT of the franchise. At least to me. And from the looks of things in the entertainment world, it's unlikely anything is knocking out from its peak anytime soon. I won't try and make any crazy predictions about what may happen in Dawntrail. It's not my strong suit. All I know is the writing team has an uphill battle in front of them with Endwalker sloppy seconds in their laps. But, like I said before, they have given us phenomenal experiences and struggles to persevere against. Fights both physical and moral in nature that engaged and enthralled us. Next time we'll delve into some of these examples and see what there is to learn from them. That, and I got a few other ideas in the works. Stay tuned for that if interested. And if I don't see you before the expansion drops, then well, happy trails to you. Like and subscribe if interested. Ciao for now.